I was referencing earlier some of these comments made by people on the American left about uh, states' rights. I mean, it's amazing to me that they would revive these old topics. That just a few years ago they were saying you were a racist bigot if you held the opinions. Oh, you're just another George Wallace or Orville Faubus or Lester Maddox. They would bring out all the names of their bogeyman and accuse you of being just a rotten human being, and now they're all claiming that they shouldn't be following what the federal government is doing. I just had a quick conversation with Steve Millington before he left the building about Donald Trump's selections, and we'll probably see one or two more today for his cabinet. Now, some Democrats are saying that they're going to slow down. What is the fellow's name? He's out of Ohio. The name slips my mind right now, but he's practically a socialist. He's a member of the U.S. Senate from Ohio. He is saying, well, since they wouldn't give us Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, we're going to slow them down. Yet, I don't think they can slow it down too much because the votes belong to the Republicans in the U.S. Senate. And then if Trump turns around, he has been rumored to be thinking about, at least for energy or agriculture, was it Heidi Heitkamp, a Democrat U.S. Senator from North Dakota? Yet she's pro energy. She's not terribly liberal. Her brother Joel is the program director at KFGO in Fargo, talk radio station in North Dakota. She's well versed in agricultural issues as well as in energy issues. And if Trump pulls her out, the Democrats wouldn't vote against her because she's one of their own. Number two, there's a special election then that would be held to fill her seat in North Dakota. And likely the numbers show that a Republican would win that election. So the Democrats will then lose an additional seat. Then it goes from 52-48 to 53-47, and there's a 6 vote margin. And there's also some rumors going around. If he were to pick her as agriculture secretary, he's also talking to the governor of Iowa today, who is also likely going to be in the running for agriculture. But if he were also to go to Joe Manchin, who should be a Republican, even though he's a registered Democrat from West Virginia, if he picked Heitkamp for agriculture and then Manchin for energy, then the Republicans, we're told, are likely going to pick up that seat. Then it becomes 54-46. You get it? So a lot of Donald Trump's picks that he's made during the course of this process have essentially been to co-opt the other side. When I was a kid growing up in southwestern New York, it's not even upstate, it's way out on the western part, the western little tail of the state. We didn't like the Republican governor we had by the name of Nelson Rockefeller. He was actually quite a liberal, and there was a huge split. New York actually has a legitimate conservative party because of that split, and in fact once elected James Buckley, Bill Buckley's brother, to the U.S. Senate as a conservative instead of a Republican. He ended up beating Roger Goodell's dad, who was one of those liberal Rockefeller Republicans in the election. I was, I think, in the second grade at the time that took place. But Rockefeller was able to rule his state because he co-opted, and he served, I mean, 4 terms before he finally resigned, and left office and turned it over to his lieutenant, and then the Democrats ended up taking control. But he was able to find people and elevate them into his cabinet who had been opponents, and then you diffuse that. That was the whole argument about Mitt Romney. Oh, well, Mitt was me. Well, Donald Trump said, I wasn't too nice to Mitt Romney either. So it went both ways. But by picking people like that, and somebody the other day was criticizing the decision to go with Elaine Chao as a cabinet member. Well, you co-opt her husband, Mitch McConnell, that way, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. So everything Trump has done has been with an eye on essentially silencing the critics. Well, this is brilliant maneuvering if you think about it. And all those people out there who thought he was going to go into Washington and set a torch to everything, well, the problem is we had a business professor in college. And when I say business professor, I stress that because business professors are generally not liberal professors. And Dr. Wilbur was not a liberal college professor. He was an arch conservative. But he was telling us in class one day, he said, look, the French Revolution did get rid of the monarchy, and it did eventually lead to a lot more equality in France. But he says, as a country, France never recovered. That's why it's called today. They refer to it as the Fifth Republic when they speak of the government. Well, when you there was a first republic, a second, a third, and a fourth. You got it. When you get to number four, when you've got it, they're still trying to get it right. They still haven't been able to do it. And do we want to get into that type of situation in this country? Yes, some of our institutions have been corrupted because the people in them have been corrupted. We were talking about that in the last half hour. And if you could just get around some of that corruption, you wouldn't need a lot of constitutional changes. The framework is still there. So Trump didn't go to Washington to burn it down because, then you got to rebuild things and you don't know what you're going to get. Draining the swamp, on the other hand, and you can partly do that perhaps by co-opting some of your enemies, it works. Or it should work, and if it doesn't, it's going to be because the swamp is so deep. And if we think it's going to be done in 4 years, it took us decades to get into this mess. When I read today where Joe Biden might, of course, he'll be 946 years old in 2020, but he's thinking about running for president. What is his criticism going to be? Well, Mr. Trump hasn't turned the economy around yet. Look, Joe, your guy had 8 years. 8 years. And how have things actually gotten better in America? If they had gotten better, Donald Trump wouldn't be going into the White House in a matter of a few weeks. What part of this does not calculate with a liberal mindset? Oh, we'll just make sure people can marry horses, cows, and pigs, and then they won't think about the fact that they don't have a job or a house. This is from the Daily Signal. November jobs report shows continuity, not recovery. Headline numbers show the unemployment rate fell by 0.3%. So that's not 3%, that's 0.3%, down to 4.6%, a large, and it is statistically significant. But the employment to population ratio, that is, the proportion of the adult population with jobs, remained unchanged. Unemployment fell primarily because labor force participation continued to decline. The largest drop in labor force participation in November occurred among, and these are the people we were told voted mainly for Hillary, the college educated. Their labor force participation rate dropped by almost half a percentage point. I'll be accurate, 0.4%. Labor force participation rates did not change at all for workers with a high school education or some college. This could reflect a change in the labor force prospects of more educated Americans, though it could also be just statistical noise. But if it is a trend, then that would affect the Democrats' voting bloc, and it would be harsh for them. Now, maybe they can appeal to those people once more, but I'm telling you, this is where the whole situation with China and all of the discussion about Mr. Trump being mean to the Chinese, and now they're going to be mean to us because he won't let them get away with all of the mayhem they want to get away with, and we should let them get away with the mayhem because, commies are good. They're almost like liberals. Well, the American economy has been in decline now in certain aspects for decades. And so to sit here and hear Joe Biden say, well, I'm going to run and I'll give him the what for in 4 years. First of all, I don't know who's going to wheel a vegetable out there to do that. But it also shows you they've got no bench. Yeah, the libs, they ate their young. When the leaders of your party are all 75, 80 years old, it might be time to start thinking about either getting a new party or finding somebody new to actually put into office. We have a caller with us. It's 9:15. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, I hope, I know you've said a lot of things, but, this thing with China, Taiwan, the pundits think they're so smart, but they've got to try to make themselves significant. At this point, the media is quickly losing its what they thought they had was control. I don't know. I guess, there's 60 million people here that don't believe a word they say. So I think it's probably growing and so his approach with tweeting with China, and is very much, it seems to me that it's all very calculated. And he says, oh, like you said, he's making a statement. It's just like this morning with Boeing. You know, they're an American company, and he said, this new Air Force One jet, $4 billion. He says that's just because we're the government doesn't mean we have to pay extravagant prices. He says, I want Boeing to be in business and I want them to make money, but I don't want them to make that much money. So you see, I think that when Al Gore comes in and we talk about Romney, that ultimately we wonder what's going on. But I think that when it boils right down, Mr. Trump is doing exactly what he wants to do, and we'll see that he is just as committed to what he said on the campaign trail as he ever was. Thanks.
Hey, thank you much for the call. A couple of quick notes on that telephone call. Mark Thiessen, who was one of George W. Bush's right-hand men, writing in the Washington Post, the headline is Trump's Taiwan call wasn't a blunder, it was brilliant. So that's coming from a member of the Bush clan, at least not by blood, but by work, employment. And then Pat Buchanan, who's anything but a Bushite, says, like a bolt of lightning, that call of congratulations from Taiwan went to President-elect Donald Trump. It illuminated the Asian landscape. And he goes on to make my point. During the 1990s and into the new century, Republicans, acting on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce and Business Roundtable, voted annually to grant most favored nation trade status for China. Then they voted them into the World Trade Organization. Beijing has manipulated her currency, demanded transfers of U.S. technology, and stolen much of what the U.S. did not turn over. Yes, it's been going on for decades. This isn't something new, and it may take decades to turn it around, but it sounds like the president-elect has that in mind. Speaking of which, Mike Pence made an appearance this morning on Fox and Friends, and the subject came up. If I get a chance, I'll share his comments with you. They were brief, but it's clear now that this was a very calculated move. Got about a minute before the break. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Good morning. Now you got about 45 seconds.
Yeah, this thing with Jill Stein stirring up the red states and recounting. Why don't Trump decide to recount California and find out how many dead people and illegal people voted for Hillary?
Thank you for the call. In the last hour of the program, I've referenced that. I said media keeps saying there's no facts or evidence that illegal immigrants voted in large numbers. And you know why there are no facts and no evidence? Because media will not go out and look for it. In other words, well, we don't want to find it. Because if we find it, and that proves Donald Trump right, then it makes us look like the, slimy, crooked liars we happen to be. Therefore, we're not going to do it. We're just going to say he's wrong, and everyone who backs him is wrong. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. About 40 more minutes of the show left. Got a couple of things more to share with you before it's over. Speaking of the media, Michelle Malkin really laid into them last night on Sean Hannity's program. I had dinner with Michelle Malkin one time. Now, she's married, so it was just a business dinner. But brilliant woman. And we'll share some of that coming up in a short while. Right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 18 at 9:20. Oh, love this theme. Growing up in a small town. Oh, I'll tell you what, there was those days I didn't have to go to school. No, I liked school, but, the sick days when you couldn't go. And there were always Andy Griffith reruns on TV about 10:30 in the morning, and you could sit down and watch those, and everything was right with the world. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com, 19 at 9:23. So this morning we had people telling me that their temperatures in some spots were down into the single digits. If you're having trouble with your furnace, then you definitely knew it today. It wasn't one of those things like, I wonder. Well, we'll put it off for a few more weeks. If you do have issues, you need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out, they'll look the thing over, and they'll make sure it gets fixed and that it works right. And they'll get it done. They'll get it done right the first time. This is why they have a great reputation and why they're known as the pros. Problem-free, cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric. That's at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. Telephone number, if you can get your frigid fingers on the phone, 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, 678-0459, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Michelle Malkin making an appearance with Sean Hannity last night on Hannity's program on the Fox News Channel. And they were talking about the perfidious mainstream media in this country, which is still caterwauling because they weren't able to tell people how to vote. People didn't listen to them. And Donald Trump thinks he's going to run the government, and they know, just ask them, that they actually run the country. Take a listen to some of her words.
It is the textbook definition of fake news, manufactured narratives. This is something I've been covering for as long as I have been not only in mainstream journalism, I've worked in newspapers, I've worked on TV, but also in new media. And that is the key here. You talked about Donald Trump using Twitter, using social media, circumventing the rest of the liberal media to get his message across. And they hate him for it.
And Dick Cheney said they don't Trump doesn't need them.
Yes.
Ever.
That's right. And there's always been this sort of dependent relationship between most of these establishment politicians and the Washington, D.C. press corps. They matter less and less now. And in large part, it is because of citizen journalism and conservative bloggers. Hey, I was part of that generation of the first wave of conservative bloggers with Hot Air, with my own blog. And you know what? We were the ones that called out the fake news manufacturers at CBS who made up. Remember when they made up the National Guard documents? Right. Yeah. And now this guy has the nerve and the chutzpah to be lecturing us about fake news? And it's the condescending attitude that is rendering them more and more irrelevant. Because look, these people, especially on the left, do not think that anybody who doesn't think like them can practice journalism.
Remember that TV show Dateline about 20 years ago? They wanted to prove that a pickup truck was dangerous, that if you hit it, that it would blow up, that the gas tank was in a spot where it would be dangerous. So they kept trying to blow this truck up, but it wasn't working. So they put a bomb beneath it, and they blew it up. And but somebody said, wait a minute, that explosion looks somewhat funny on that videotape there. You sure you didn't put a bomb under there? Hamada. How about that same network when it used that edited 911 tape from Zimmerman down in Florida? Yeah. Now, they're claiming that other people are pushing fake news. Whenever these types of things happen, then the media says, oh, we have to do our soul searching. Yes. Oh, this is going to give us all a bad reputation and play right into the narrative that we do fake news. Yes. But we don't. How about the New York Times when it hired a guy named Jason Blair, and he went out and he was essentially just hanging around New York City buying crack cocaine and smoking it. But he was writing all these stories claiming he'd gone down to West Virginia and interviewed Jessica Lynch, and he was doing all of these war stories from his apartment where he was always, stoned out of his gourd until he was finally discovered. Would that be fake news? I guess it would be. In fact, the New York Times was one of the biggest purveyors of fiction in the country at the time. So for all of this stuff where they always wrap themselves in their J school degrees and say, oh, no, you dumb dummies, you need to listen to us. I'm sorry, but I can make a distinction. Sometimes we all get caught once in a while when we're posting something to Facebook that comes from a bogus site, but usually, when you pick it up, you delete it. I don't think that people's minds are being changed by a fake news story may reinforce somebody's belief, but what you're trying to do is they're trying to use all of their buddies over at Facebook and Twitter who run those countries, their fellow traveling communist liberals. They're trying to use all of them to shut down things they don't like. In other words, we don't want these other voices out there because we're trying to tell you that Donald Trump is bad and you need to listen to us. Yeah, it's going to be bad for the country. And so 4 years from now, when we get a chance, we got to get rid of him. Yeah. We can't have somebody else out there who might have a dissenting viewpoint because we in the media need to control you. When my daughter had me watch this movie, the remake of The Time Machine, the first one was pretty bad. Remember the goofy-looking Morlocks that looked like they were like the little trolls that your little girls used to buy and put atop their dresser drawers in their bedrooms? Well, the remake of it was a little bit more frightening, I thought. But there's a scene at the end of the movie where the hero is speaking to the guy who controls the Morlocks, who eat people. They're sort of a half man, half dog type of creature in the updated version. It's very frightening. But there's an albino who controls their minds, and he says to the hero of the film, I have to do it because otherwise they would exhaust the food supply. Media's view of you, they're like the albinos, that you're too dang dumb to be able to make decisions on your own, so they need to guide you along with their friends in the bureaucracy in government or in academia because they told themselves all how smart they were. They were at a wine and cheese party last week, patting each other on the back and saying, yes, let's go listen to some jazz music. Yes, and maybe we'll see a production of Hamilton as well. First, let's have a little bit more Cabernet. Right. None of them actually work for a living or. Nope, nope, nope. But golly gee, they're the smartest people in the country because, well, Trump's voters were uneducated. Tell you what, I know a lot of people who work hard for a living. That welder out there is making $135,000 a year. Yeah, he's a real dummy because he didn't go to college. It's 20. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. More of the same ahead, I guarantee you.